أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm going to be reading chapter 12 today from 1 to 37. Okay? And then we'll discuss it, inshallah. Okay, here you go, Mark, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. ALR. These are the proofs of this clarifying scripture. We have indeed revealed to you an Arabic Quran that you may use your intelligence. We narrate to you through the inspiration of this Quran the best narration that you were not aware of previously. Once Joseph said to his father, "O my father, indeed I dream of 11 planets and the sun and the moon. I see them prostrating to me." He said, "O my son, do not tell of your dream to your brothers, lest they plan against you a conspiracy. Indeed, Satan is a manifest enemy of a human being. And this is how your Lord will choose you and will teach you the interpretation of dreams, and will perfect his blessings upon you and upon the descendants of Jacob, as he perfected previously upon your fathers Abraham and Isaac. Indeed, your Lord is all-knowing, all-wise." Indeed, in Joseph and his brothers are signs for people who seek. Once they said, "Indeed, Joseph and his brother are more loved by our father than us, despite our large number. Indeed, our father has clearly gone astray. Let us kill Joseph or maroon him so we can have our father's attention all to ourselves, and then we will all become righteous people." A spokesman among them said, "Let us not kill Joseph, and let us throw him into the abyss of the well, so that some caravan may pick him up, if this is what you wish to do." They said, "O our father, why do you not trust us with Joseph when we can be his mentors? Send him with us tomorrow to run around and play while we surely stand guarding him." He said, "Indeed, it makes me sad when you take him away, and I am afraid that the wolf may devour him while you are not paying attention." They said, "If the wolf devours him, despite our large number, then indeed we would be real losers." Then soon after they left with him, they reached consensus to throw him into the abyss of the well. And we inspired him, You will for sure tell them about this. However, they do not perceive." And in the dark of the night they came back to their father weeping. They said, "O our father, we went racing and left Joseph by our provisions. Then the wolf devoured him, and you may not believe us, although we are telling the truth." And they presented his shirt stained with fake blood. He said, "You have come up with some scheme. Therefore I will resort to quiet patience, and may God help me in the face of your schemes." And a caravan was passing by. They sent their water-bearer, and he lowered his bucket. He said, "Good news, here is a boy." They kept him hidden as part of their belongings, and God knew full well what they were doing. And they sold him cheap for a few dirhams, because they had no interest in him. And the one from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, "Welcome him to the house. He may be useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son." And we thus established Joseph on the land in order to teach him interpretation of dreams. And God is always victorious in executing his command. However, most people do not know. And when he reached maturity, we granted him wisdom and knowledge, and we thus reward the righteous. And the lady of the house, where he was staying, tried to seduce him. So she locked the doors and said, "I am all yours." He said, "I seek refuge in God. Indeed, he is my Lord, who has given me the best home for sure. He does not allow the transgressors to succeed." And indeed, she almost gave in to him, and he almost gave in to her, if it were not that he saw a proof from his Lord. We thus diverted evil and away from him. He was indeed one of our pure servants. And the two of them raced towards the door, and she tore his shirt from the back, and they found her husband at the door. She said, "What is the requital for the one who has evil intentions toward your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment?" He said, "She is the one who tried to seduce me." A witness from her family offered testimony by saying, "If his shirt is torn from the front, then she is telling the truth, and he is a liar. However, if his shirt is torn from the back, then she is lying, and he is the truthful one." Once he saw his shirt was torn from the back, he said, "Indeed, this is your scheming, and surely your scheming is great. Joseph overlooked this matter. As for you, you shall ask forgiveness for your sin. Indeed, you have been a wrongdoer." And the women in the city said that the wife of the Aziz has tried to seduce her young man. She is madly in love. We surely see her in manifest straying. When she heard about their gossip, she sent for them and provided for them comfortable places, and gave each one of them a knife and said, "Go to them." Once they saw him, they were so overwhelmed by him that they cut their hands and said, "Glory to God, this is not a human being, this is an honorable angel." She said, "This is the one that you blame me for desiring him, and I indeed did try to seduce him, but he maintained purity, and if he does not do what I command him to do, I will surely imprison him and make him lowly." He said, "Lord, the prison is more to my liking than what they call upon me to do, and unless you divert their scheme from me, I may desire them and become one of the ignorant ones." His Lord then responded to him and diverted their scheme from him. Indeed, he is the all-hearer. Indeed, he is the all-hearer, the all-knower. Afterwards, despite seeing all the proofs, they decided to imprison him for a while. And two young men entered the prison with him. One of them said, "Indeed, I have a dream where I am making wine." And the other one said, "I dreamed that I am carrying bread atop my head, and the birds are eating from it." Inform us of their interpretations, for we see that you are one of the righteous ones. He said, "I can inform of the food that the two of you are going to eat before you receive it. Thus my Lord has taught me. Indeed, I have forsaken the nation of the people who have no faith in God and are disbelievers in the hereafter."
Okay, thank you, mashallah. Okay, very good. Are there any questions, comments, or observations?
Hi, Dr. Fazely.
Alaikum assalam. Yes, go ahead, please.
So I thought today during Friday prayer, what you were saying about the closed doors
Yes.
related to this was so compelling. It's so spot on, and I think, when people think they're doing things behind closed doors, nobody can see them. Maybe no person can see them, but you're saying, the rocks can see you, the trees can see you, and I think most importantly is God can see you. I mean, it doesn't do any good to close a door because the wrong that you're doing is being seen. It's being laid bare for God. And I think sometimes, and I'm not saying we generally, I'm not saying anybody, but I think sometimes when I do something I know that I shouldn't, like I can't compartmentalize God because he can't be compartmentalized. He's everywhere. And we're within him, so it doesn't do any good to do anything wrong intentionally. But I just wanted to comment on that because that just really resonated with me.
Very good, very good. That's the aim. Okay, so I say just remind people of these kind of things, and as you see, you can read it here, but, we look at this as like a soap opera or something. There's a lot more than a soap opera. God is telling us, of the system that He has created. And you see, there is a big difference between these witnesses and God as a witness. God as a witness can overlook that and forgive us and change our pasts. These things would not do that. You see, these are the ones that people are going to be humiliated on the day of judgment if they continue doing it and do not repent to God. They are going to be humiliated by these entities that God has put in place, and they're all surrounding us, and there is nothing we can do. They're recorders.
I think more so, for me personally, more so than the hellfire and the absolute, physical agony of hell. I think the humiliation part,
Yes.
it sounds 100 times worse. It sounds 100 times worse because you can't escape the physical agony, but agony of your soul and your emotions, I just can't imagine. Like it's really, really worrisome to think that would happen. And God won't speak to you. He won't look at you.
That's right. Very good. Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or observations or questions?
Salam alaikum, Ali.
Walaikum assalam, Tasneem. Yes, go ahead, please.
It appears from the verse 12:18 that is it 12:18 that Jacob knew that these guys were scheming. Yeah, 12:18.
Yes,
he
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that was a big grief for him that he just couldn't do anything.
Yep, exactly. Although he didn't have DNA test or something to see that this is animal blood.
Yeah.
But he knew it. Yes.
He knew.
Yeah. Well, this is again goes back to this thing, to this, the prophets were given knowledge and wisdom, or wisdom and knowledge. Okay, so they had these knowledge that other people didn't know. Okay, including obviously Jacob's sons. They didn't know what their father actually knew, because he said, "I know something you don't know." Okay, so he knew something that they didn't know about, and so God is revealing this to us, that He knew that this was something that they concocted. Yeah.
That must have been a very big test for Jacob.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Anything else?
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, observations?
Salam, Dr. Fazely.
Walaikum assalam. Yes, Nishat, go ahead, please.
In regards to Jacob, at the same time, it's talking about how he treated his sons differently. And even nowadays,
Exactly.
what we see happens, like the kind of, hatred and enmity that happens when children are not treated, same way and so on. And I think in some way it was not only a test, but also a punishment for Jacob, that he has to go through that separation, and he was so saddened that he even, like he was crying, he lost his eyesight and stuff like that. So I think that there's so much different lessons in this surah, but one of those is not to treat, if you have children, do not treat them differently, because that causes jealousy, they become enemies.
It causes a lot of resentments, yes.
Yeah. And maybe that's the reason that, God forgave Joseph's brothers, because God understands all these feelings and root causes and stuff like that. It's not like they're justified in what they've done, but God is so merciful that understands where they were coming from, and maybe they really regretted what they did. But I mean, all around, it's not. And I don't know if it's something that I don't have any kids, but is it something that parents can control if they have a few, like um, some, I mean, if they treat their kids differently and so on, if it's under their control or something else. But it just has so many cascading effects in everybody's life.
Very true, very true. You're right, absolutely right. So this is another lesson that we learn from this, and the consequence that it causes. Actually, I mean, look at the consequences. So they're devastating, and so yeah, one has to be very careful how they treat their kids, and so it's a lesson to everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Salam, Dr. Fazely. It's Tracy.
Yes, go ahead,
Hello?
please.
Hi.
Yes.
I just wanted to further comment on what Nashat was saying. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Excuse me if I'm not. But I just wanted to say, every time I read that surah, I think about how I always felt that he was almost idolizing his son in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a reminder, like, not to do that. And I understand as a parent how much you may love your child, but that, you have to put God first and have a balance as well for your other children, especially if, it seems that him and his brother were his favorite. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Very good. Very good. I
Thank
mean,
you.
you're absolutely right. The other thing is that you also have to remember now that this boy was an extremely handsome boy. Okay? So you have to bring that into the equation too. And you're right. I mean, this guy, he was doing this, and Jacob was paying attention to him because obviously he was better looking than his other kids. So we will see from the ladies who, cut their hands when he walks in, and so this also has to be brought into the equation, and all of these things. But you are absolutely right. That means that Jacob was paying a lot more attention to this, and the idea is that it doesn't matter how handsome this boy is, it still should not be a factor in this decision that he made to pay more attention to him rather than the other kids.
Salam alaikum again, Ali.
Alaikum salam. Yes.
About that word of cutting the hands also comes up. We come across in this surah, 1231. Waqattana, and then 538 about the thief is a slightly different word, right? 538, it doesn't mean cut off the hands but take into custody.
No, it doesn't mean cut off hands. No, obviously it doesn't mean cut off hands. No. Yeah. No. But the thing about the thief, I don't even believe that you have to mark their hands. I mean, I explained that several times. It means you cut off their hands from the society, so they will not be able to go through this motion of theft again and become a thief again and again. So the idea is that crime has to be, the punishment has to be equivalent to the crime that they commit. There is a big difference for somebody who is, stealing a loaf of bread from the store because he is hungry, and somebody who is embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars. So the punishment, which is equivalent to that, has to be obviously different, and God has that in mind when He says that. So it's because in this same surah, Joseph says, what is the punishment for somebody who's committing theft? And they say that you can take him into custody. That was the idea. That's why they could not bring their brother back. Okay?
Which
So,
verse is that for that word, Ali?
I'm sorry?
Sorry.
Custody?
Which word is that when Joseph says that?
Oh, it's in here. We haven't reached it yet. It's towards the end of it. Okay?
Yes.
When you see, he puts a picture in his bag.
Yes.
And then somebody says, oh, a picture is missing.
Yeah.
And so, you see, Joseph was a prophet. So he knew what the punishment was. So he's asking his brother, what is your punishment for somebody who's doing that? He says, you can take him into custody. Okay? So when you put that together with the other verse in the Quran, which is 31, which says that, you know, that the punishment, or I'm sorry, verse Surah 5, when it says that the punishment for the theft should be cutting off the hands, as they practice in these so-called Muslim countries, you know, that's completely out of character with the qisas, which means equivalence, absolute equivalence. So it has to be proportioned to the crime which is committed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salam again, Dr. Fazely.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a similar saying in Arabic, but if you remember, in Farsi there is a saying that to shorten somebody's hand, like dastashو کوتاه کنی.
Exactly. That's
meaning
right.
that they would prevent them to have access to doing something.
Exactly. That is exactly true. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe in Arabic it's something like that too.
But it is, in this means basically to put them in jail. Okay, so that's what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It means that
Put them in jail.
they won't have opportunity to repeat or
That's right. They will not have the opportunity to do the theft again. Yeah, to steal again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, you see, I'm going through this, and so we are all going through this journey that we are going together. And the journey is that we keep understanding and realizing who God is. And then according to that, then we can actually understand His word much better, what He really means when He says something. Okay? And do not interpret according to our own wishes and according to our own biases and prejudice that we have, and try to draw a conclusion and apply those laws that we think that God is telling us to do to the society at large, which really has nothing to do with the scripture.
Salam, Dr. Fazly.
Alaikum salam, Shakira. Yes, go ahead, please.
You know, I was reading this Surah 5 a few days ago, maybe 2 days back, and what struck me about it was this. It said, in 538, it says, as for the thief, be it male or female, we shall take them into custody, or as all the others are saying that, cut off the hands. And then the very next verse is talking about further about the same thing. And they're saying, thereafter, whoever repents after committing his transgression and reforms, God will then forgive him. Indeed, God is all forgiving and all merciful. How can God tell them to cut the hands off, and then he's repenting for it, and then God is going to forgive him? Why would God tell them to cut their hands off?
Yeah, exactly. You see?
I mean, that it's so clear when you read those two verses together that you are not understanding what God is saying. God is telling He's all forgiving, all merciful, two of His most beautiful names. And they keep talking about the same thing like that. I mean, it really is rubbish.
Yes.
I know. It makes me so mad.
When you don't understand, you're basically creating a God in your own image.
I'm sorry.
So this is what you do. I mean, you see, that's the problem with these, as I said, with these applying of these laws. These laws have nothing to do with the Quran, with God, for that matter. Okay? So these are the things that we actually think that this is a better way of living, and we interpret the commandments in the Quran in that way, and then we make basically a farce out of everything, which really has nothing to do with the Quran. So,
Yes.
Quran is very clear. I mean, it has to be absolute equivalence. Okay, you cannot do that. You cannot punish somebody. Suppose even if you mark the hands of the thief. Suppose you went that far, they mark the hand of the thief. That means the guy who's stealing $100 million, his hand is going to be marked, and the guy in the grocery store who's stealing a loaf of bread because he's hungry, his hand is also marked too. So what's the difference between the two? Okay, so
Exactly.
you have to understand this, and then you put in who God is and what God actually has in mind. Okay, and when He says these things, that it has to be absolute equivalent, and punishment cannot exceed the crime. Okay, so and so these are very important things that we have to have in mind when we read the Quran. Otherwise, we are just going to be as bad as the rest of the community.
And also, after you started doing so many things, changing so many things, like for example, unless you compare the verses and come up for a conclusion at the end of actually examining all the verses, then you have to understand what it really means. Instead of just translating one word and then telling you can go whack your wife, and then you're telling that the angels, they can cut off their necks and hands, when in fact the first thing the angels told God is that why would you create somebody like this who shed blood? Means that they don't shed blood.
Yes.
And here you are telling them cut off, they cut off God is telling them to cut off their necks.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense because they tell you clearly what the angels do. God says, I'll support you as you go to do that work of helping those believers.
Yes.
I'll support you because they don't want to go hit them or beat them or anything. They just want to do the right thing, and He's telling them, don't worry about it. I'll be right there, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Disrupt the communication, blah, blah, and all those things. You don't have to hit or kill or do any of those things which they are doing to themselves.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yes, very good. No, I understand exactly what you're saying. So it's not, as I said, it's not.
Yeah. They make God out to be something He's not. They don't understand.
Well, as I said, they create a God in their own image, basically. That's what they are doing. So.
Yeah.
So that whatever they have, what kind of tradition they have, they apply that tradition, and then they say, well, the Quran says this, and the Quran doesn't say that actually. The Quran says something completely different.
Yeah, one thing that you tell all the time is that this tradition, all these false traditions, become so strong that somebody will even kill you if you tell them that they're wrong.
They won't take it, though. They won't take it, yeah.
They won't take it, and in fact, they will hate you, and they will not understand you, and they will, I don't know, it's just that those traditions have become very strong. You cannot, I don't know, only God has to help you to change. That's what it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Salam again, Dr. Fazely.
Salam. Yes, go.
Okay, so I was thinking about, and I don't know the verse, but in the Juma maybe a year or two ago, we were talking about for adultery having 4 witnesses.
Yes.
And just from I don't have any experience living in anywhere where this might happen, but just in seeing news and reading and maybe a movie here or there, that seems to be something that is really popular to do. And the one thing that really stuck with me about what you said was, you need to mind your own business. Why are there 4 people peeking in the window, if you will? How did that happen?
Exactly.
That's between God. Like there really should never be an opportunity for 4 people to be involved.
Yep.
For that kind of thing. And that's always stuck with me because I had somebody say to me not too long ago, well, what about this? And I just said, well, I think you could turn that around right there and say, why are there 4 people watching?
Exactly.
Like, what? I mean, who's doing the worst thing here? Not that any of it's good, but I'm saying that why are there 4 people that have seen this? If they truly are witnesses. But I just want to comment on that. I remember you talking about that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that seems to be an example of God being very, vengeful, and I think maybe it's a tradition that is just become evil. This is what God says, this is how we're going to do it, and maybe there's some scheming involved in that also.
But I mean, that tradition was to stone the adulterer and adulteress. You see, that was the tradition that they had, and still maintained. They maintain that tradition. They haven't, and there are hadith that says that the ayahs that were said that the stoning of the adulterer and adulteress were written on a piece of paper, and a holy goat came and ate it. Okay, so
A holy goat or
yes.
holy goat?
Goat.
Oh, good Lord. Okay.
So anyway, and he came and ate those 2 ayahs. So, or the ayah that was supposed to be the stoning. But this is the kind of reasoning that you're going to face when you talk to these kind of people. But anyway, yeah. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, God says, "Tell the believing men to subdue their eyes. Tell the believing women to subdue their eyes." So the point is that they would never look at that to begin with. So they are not an eyewitness to that act. So it is really the high standard of thing that finding 4 honest eyewitnesses that somehow they saw this accidentally with no malice in their hearts. Okay, it's going to be
going to happen.
absolutely, absolutely impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Yes. So you won't get to the idea of lashes and stuff.
Thank you very much. I thought that was kind of, God knows full well what they're doing. God knows the scheming and,
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Fazely.
Walaikum salam. Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, I've been thinking about the point that Nishat raised earlier about Joseph and his Jacob and his relationship with his other sons, and it is bothering me quite a bit because I mean, God knows the truth, of course, but I don't quite see it like that. And when you read these verses, Joseph was a special child without a doubt. And Jacob himself was a prophet of God, and so he knew. Joseph shared his dream with Jacob, and Jacob told him his advice as to how to deal with it. I don't know if I'm not convinced that Joseph then being taken away and all that was a retribution for Jacob preferring. I mean, I don't see it. It doesn't explicitly, obviously, say. In fact, he says he resorted to patience and he knew from God what others didn't know, and this whole incident was part of a plan of God to change the course of history, and they followed their pieces. I mean, they followed their roles within it, and whether or not their jealousy or his perceived lack of love or attention for them was the predicator is God knows, and of course it may be true and all that, but I can't help but think that that's not the real crux of the issue here, right? And it's a different thing, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, as I said, you're right. I mean, it doesn't explicitly say that, but the idea that he was paying more attention to him than the other kids is not a good thing to do. That is my point, okay? And that's the point that Nishad was making. that this act is not a good act to do. If you have several children, I mean, I don't have several children. We only have one, by God's grace and mashallah. But anyway, in our case, we didn't have this problem. But now let's assume that you have 2 or 3 or 4 kids. And so it is not a good practice to prefer one of them over the others. Okay, just at the basis of being fair and impartial. So one has to try to do that. That is the idea that I'm trying to promote here. And I don't think that God meant for that he's supposed to do that.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And Salam, Dr. Fazely.
Yes.
And Sadruddin, that was a very good point. I didn't mean it to come so strong to say as a punishment for Jacob, but I think even this happening this way, because God says in Joseph and his brothers, there is a lesson to be learned. And I think
exactly.
that was one of the reasons I thought that maybe the relationships had something to do with these consequences. I agree with Sadruddin that these were all meant to happen, and each one of them played a role in it. But things that happen and God puts things in place to happen, there is a reason for it. And specifically in this case, I mean, at least for me, one of the things was that. And then, when God says that those who believe do not get sad and grieve over things that they lose, obviously, I mean, Jacob was a prophet of God. He was a strong believer, but he was still like he was grieving. And I think the reason for it was that, when something happens to you as a consequence of your own behavior or something that you have done, that's even, for somebody who believes in God, that's even more reason to grieve. Like for myself, when I do something and I know it's wrong, that knowledge that I've done something wrong is even more annoying than the actual act. And so, again, I didn't mean it to be so strongly to say it was a punishment for Jacob, who was a prophet of God. But I think all these things, even the mistakes that prophets make or messengers make, and God knows about those, are there or happen there for a reason, for us to learn not to do the same thing.
Well, as a rule, as I said, it's not a righteous act to do it. As a rule, it's not a righteous act to prefer one of your children over the others. And he was practicing this. And as I said, this boy was obviously an extremely handsome boy, and he had love for him. And we make these mistakes too, okay? I mean, the blind man comes in there and the prophet, is frowns, okay, and he's annoyed by that. So all of these things happen to everybody, and so it's not something which is out of the ordinary for everybody. So that's the idea that as a rule is not a righteous act to do this, to prefer one of your children over the others. But he did. Okay, and it was a mistake.
Fazely.
Yes, go ahead, Sadruddin. First go, Sadruddin.
Sir, I'd actually wanted to, if with your permission, talk a little bit about the story of Moses that we spoke about in the Friday prayer. But
yes,
if somebody else would continue to have this discussion, then I'm happy to wait.
Yeah,
okay.
I would like to comment on something. So, Dr. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Fazely. So I understand about a parent treating their kids the same, but then there can be a situation that the parent has multiple kids. One child may be weaker emotionally or physically, so obviously that parent will be more caring towards that child. And the other siblings also should be more compassionate to that child. So in that case, there is there is more care towards the other child, so it's not going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, but God, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about giving everything else equal. Okay, I'm not talking about a child who is handicapped or has some kind of problems. Then the other children also should help too. They understand that. But this isn't a case when somebody was preferring one over the others with no given reason, obviously, or something says, because they say that, him and his brother are more loved by our father than us, and he just ignoring us, basically. So that's what the idea was.
Okay, so provided all the kids are at the same level.
Yeah,
okay.
but this is, for somebody who needs help and everything, needs attention, everybody should pay attention to them, not just the parents. But then the other children will understand that. Okay? Children are smarter than we think they are. So they understand it. But in this case, when somebody is getting more attention than other ones with no apparent reason to the other kids, okay, then the others will react negatively to this whole situation.
That's true. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Fazely.
Wa alaikum salam. Go ahead, please. Yes.
This is Tony from Virginia.
Yes.
Jerry was saying it's almost similar to just people preferring like boys over girls.
Yes.
It's the same thing. It's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Fazely. It's Karen. I just wanted to say something.
Yes.
So, to your point about how it affected this family negatively, as we go through the verses in the next few weeks, we'll see that even into adulthood, the other brothers. Remember when Jacob says, "I smell Joseph." When we read the other verses, Jacob says, "I smell the scent of Joseph." And then the brothers were saying, "You're still in your old," I forget the exact words, but because when they put Joseph in the well, they had no idea what happened to him.
Yeah.
So they probably thought that, maybe whatever they thought happened to him, but the idea was that to get rid of him. But then all of those years later, Jacob's mind was still on Joseph. So
yes.
It's just to your point about the negative effects of favoritism could have on on the whole family dynamics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead and Sadruddin, you wanted to ask some.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I wanted to make a comment specifically on the golden calf and the sound that it made. And this is something that I've read so many times, and just today after listening to you, I seem to have something connect in my head, which I had never thought of before. Is this supernatural event occurrence is an out of the ordinary kind of a thing, right? It's not that they just made this thing and a common statue or something like that. This thing actually made a sound and differentiated itself in a very unusual and supernatural way, and it helped me to kind of understand that even today these kind of tests are placed before people. When I hear about the speaking in tongues, for example, that is that people see, or within Sufism and the mysticism, and they go into these trance-like type of states, or they've got stories about how these miracles occur in these tombs of these supposedly pious people who passed away, and for all I know, I always thought it was kind of somebody's just doing hocus pocus or trying to intentionally pull the wool over people's eyes. But I realized today that these kind of things actually must happen, and they are a test, and it is important to understand that ultimately all of these things are immaterial. Even if a calf made a sound, it does not help you. Even if you think that you go to a tomb and you see a miraculous event, that even if the miraculous event is an actual miraculous event, it doesn't allow you to digress from the fact that that God is the only one that can be attributed to these things, and not that individual who's sitting dead in the tomb or whatever it is. And I just realized that there are probably thousands and thousands of these kind of supernatural events that occur that are tests for us, and I used to belittle them and papa them as if they know it's just your imagination, it didn't exist, but it probably occurred, and it doesn't take away from the crux of the test by any means, but the fact of the matter is that thing did have a sound, and yet the people were required to hold strong, and and like you always said, we think in hindsight that we would do better. I wonder how many of us really would.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. That is very true.
Dr. Fazely, in regards to this universal consciousness that you talked about, it has really changed my attitude. Like, even when I'm walking and even I'm thinking something bad comes to my head, and I feel like, oh, maybe, our thoughts are not even private. I know God knows all our innermost thoughts, but even things around us would know what those thoughts are and are happening in our head. And, even some actions, like nowadays is so funny, but even like an ant or a cockroach, when you see it and you want to, like, the first thing is kill the cockroach, and then I'm like, uh-oh, the cockroach is thinking that this is, the cockroach most probably even knows who we are. Yep. Like the ant knew it was the Solomon's army and know everything about them, but the Solomon or he knew the language of the animals, but the rest of us, we don't know what all those things around us are thinking about us.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually, I was going to talk about the animals too, chapter 27, but then again, for somehow it slipped my mind. But that is another degree of consciousness that we think that they have consciousness. We don't give that consciousness to the rest of the universe. But again, as I always say, it's a collective consciousness that the entire universe has, and it doesn't matter what they are. To us they look dead, but they're not dead really. Okay, so, and you're right. I mean, all those events that happen, that thoughts that you have, there's a reason that thought happens inside your brain, because that thought actually excites some electrons in some atom inside your brain. But that's an event, and that event is recorded in the entire universe. And so that is going to come out, and God is going to replay that. And the idea is that's the humiliation that we are going to suffer because of that thought, or because of that mistake that we made. Yeah. Everything is recorded.
And that's why it's so important God emphasizes of the intention, because even the intention, even if it doesn't turn into an action, a bad intention, it still has some effect.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Salam, Dr. Fazly.
Walaikum salam.
I just wanted to make a comment about 12:29 and 12:30. The way the husband handled the issue with his wife is so amazing. Said, Joseph overlooked this matter. As for you, you shall ask forgiveness for your sin. Indeed, you have been a wrongdoer. So I can't imagine this normally happening, because every time we come across things like this, there's a huge problems and things go out of control. But she's handling it really well, because when you go on to see this, that she's still able to be doing whatever she wants to do, say whatever she wants to say, plan the things that the way she plans. So I think this relationship that they had and the way the husband behaved is a lesson to learn.
Exactly. Yes, true. It is true. Yep. It's very true.
That's all I wanted to say.
Very good. Very good.
Salam alaikum again, Ali.
Yes, walaikum salam. Go ahead, Tasneem, please.
I mean, towards the end, so I want to point out something that we can all feel happy about. And you talk about this every Friday, that we have to thank Allah that we get together every Friday and worship God alone. You say that every week, that we should be thankful to God. So the verse 12:38 says that, and I have to say something more about it, but I'll read it out. Joseph says, I followed the nation of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We never set up anything as a partner for God. This is grace from God upon us and upon the people, but most people are not appreciative.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, we think, if we know that we worship God alone, and we think, oh, we are so good, we worship God alone, and so is an idol worshiper of some kind. But we don't have to be that proud. We only have to thank God, not be proud of it, because it's not our doing. It's a grace from God that we worship Him alone.
Yes. Yes.
And appreciate that fact all the time.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've just read it here that said that God actually diverted evil from Joseph, evil and vice from Joseph, you see, by showing him that sign. So it's God who is doing this, actually, and that's what we have to be grateful for. Okay, so if we are not committing wrong things, committing sins, if we are doing righteous work, the source of all of these is God, and so we should be grateful to Him for giving us this guidance. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, anything else? Okay, if there... Alaikum salam. Yes, Mahmoud?
Yeah, just want to bring out, 12:7 says, indeed in Joseph and his brothers there are signs for people who seek. And has shown us that this chapter is loaded with information about that community. And one example is here in verse 23, where the lady says, I'm all yours. And here's a young man, maybe a teenager, saying, I seek refuge in God. Compare that to today's generation, where we have, it became a normal thing.
Yeah.
This type of behavior is adultery and fornication and trash everywhere you look, And here is a young man who is keeping to be a celibate, and to, God says, do not look at the woman and keep your chaste. And here he is, keeping his chaste. To the point where in 33, he chose to go to jail instead of committing misbehavior and adultery. He chose to go to jail.
Yes.
In today's society, can you see that? How morally we became. Just despicable. I mean, so he's a great moral character. That for the young generation, our teenagers.
Exactly. That is true. That's very true.
Keep chaste. Keep your sexual affairs until you get married.
Yeah.
Keep them. All this information is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. This chapter, gives us you will see lies, deception, gossip, suspicion, murder, stealing, forgiveness, jealousy, envy, everything. All that I counted like 20 different topics in this chapter that we have to, meditate on it and just don't read through it, but just think about it and the lessons that we learn. God bless. Peace.
Yes. Well, I mean, you can see that. You can see the strong belief in God that Joseph had. And it's amazing. That's in verse 22. And first thing that comes to his mind after the lady of the house says, "I'm all yours," he said, "I seek refuge in God."
Yeah.
Okay? So it's amazing. Okay, so he said that indeed he is my Lord who has given me the best home. For sure, he does not allow the transgressors to succeed. So he understands that, he knows that, and so this is absolute belief in God. This is the same thing that Mary said in chapter 19. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we read about that too when God's Spirit actually comes to her in the shape of a perfect man, and
Amazing.
she says,
You know, I do interpretation for the doctors, for the Somali community, and teenagers come to the doctor. First thing the doctor, are you sexually active? You know, he's 12-year-old. 12 years old, and she's asking, are you sexually active? I mean, just look at that morality. You know?
Yeah, I know.
Why would you even say that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that one, in chapter 19 and other places in the Quran, when God talks about Mary, He says, "The one who kept her chastity," over and over and over again. Okay, so this is such an important thing. It's paramount, and that it's a lesson to people that that keeping the chastity is basically a priority that they have to keep in mind. And obviously, morality is not there to forbid him from exercising vice.
MashaAllah. I mean, what a great example. He's a young man who, instead of committing sexual misbehavior, he chose to go to jail.
I mean, if this guy wanted to do that with his looks, okay, he could have all these women.
Absolutely.
He wouldn't have any problems. Okay? But this is the man who does not abuse his looks. Other people would have abused their looks. You see, so that's another thing. That, somebody is good looking or something, they abuse it and they to their evil things. And try to, become a predator. But he didn't do that. Yeah.
So to the young parents, please instill our children to keep chaste and to obey God, to be chaste. It's a great lesson.
And Dr. Fazely, another thing is that you mentioned a good point about Mary, and in most of the religious societies and even like non-religious, keeping the chastity for women is very much accepted and expected. Yet it's not expected or for men. And I've seen so many, so-called religious families where they wouldn't allow their girls to go out, but they talk with pride about how many girlfriends their boys have. And it's just such a hypocrisy and
double standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you're right. You're right. I mean, those are the type of things that we're just discussing here, okay, today. Okay, that you should not have different, different scales when you deal with your children. They all have to be equal. And so, people don't do that. And somebody said that, that a lot of people, they prefer boys over girls and things like that. So, yeah, very good. Okay, anything else before we quit for tonight? Okay, so let's do our 3 Al-Fatiha.